starting I'm currently starting my third startup, so at the moment, and working 2 other jobs to pay the bills. So just really busy trying to figure out how we're going to build a new business. So it's exciting. It's my favorite thing this time, trying to figure out lots of big problems.
All right, great. Yeah, so we'll get into it today. And, you know, part of what we're discussing today is to essentially understand how to build a scalable technology business. Based on your experience building startup, like you mentioned, this is the 3rd one you're building. You've exited one. You've also been part of setting up different accelerator program across the world. You have experience working with startups, and it's important for startups to grow, right? To scale. You know, that is one of the essential DNA of building a startup. You have to be able to scale with that technology. And it's on that background that we want to have this fireside chat. And we'd like to start with understanding what is scalable for tech founders.
Yeah, so a scalable business is one that grows, but it's one that compounds as well. So what I mean by that is a business that grows every month, every quarter, every year. You have a little more revenue, you might hire a few more people. But in a business that would call a scaling business, you can make more money and grow your revenues without necessarily hiring more people. So a good example is maybe a digital or a creative agency, where they can grow and you can make a lot of money being a digital agency, but they're very hard to scale because all the work you do is on a one-for-one basis. A client gives you a brief, you do the work, and you can't really use that work again for the next client. So there's a lot of manpower and a lot of resource needed. Whereas the interesting thing, especially around tech businesses, is if you build a product once, you can sell it an infinite number of times. You might have some scaling issues with customer support or your Amazon AWS bill, but the product itself is capable of scaling and being duplicated many times over. So that's kind of a growth business and a growing business and a scaling business, I guess.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So can you just break down in sectors what businesses have like a potential to scale? You mentioned like a digital agency, maybe like gyms too. For example, if you are building like gym chains, you need physical locations for people, right? You can just break it down in terms of sectors. What businesses have potentials to scale in terms of scaling advantage than others? Maybe sector based.
It's really interesting. I'll come to an interesting example in a moment, but I think it's worth starting out by saying if you want to build a business, it doesn't have to be a scaling business. It's quite acceptable to build a nice business that makes you some income and pays for your mortgage and employs a few people. It doesn't have to be one that changes the world. It's very much a personal thing about what drives you and what you would like to see. But the interesting thing about tech businesses, and the reason they're of interest, especially to investors, is that with a little bit of money, you can grow a business to a very large scale, because the barriers to entry are pretty low right now. If you can get a little bit of data and get online, or you can attend coding camps or schools and you can learn this, there's no one going to stop you. You don't need formal qualifications to do it. So you still need a little bit of privilege, a little bit of cash, so you can get data. And that's why tech businesses are the best example of scaling. What's interesting is you can take you can take that learning and apply it to other businesses. So a friend of mine is currently building a chain of cosmetic clinics, which are bricks and mortar. They are physical locations. They are hard to scale. But the interesting thing is he's using everything he's learned about building digital products, and he's digitizing the entire operations of those products. So everything from being able to offer digital coupons to digital payments to processes behind the scenes, he's able to create massive efficiencies because he's not building a bricks and mortar business in a traditional way. He's able to scale the operations. So it means he can expand faster because his costs and resource he needs are less. So there's lots you can do there, and you can apply the lessons you learn in building a digital business to other sectors.
Absolutely. That's really amazing. And I really like something you touched on when you mentioned it depends on like what the founder wants, right? You don't necessarily have to build the business with locations across the world or with businesses that have to like change the world. So to say, you can have a business that just employ 10 people and you're okay if that's your goal as a founder. All right. So I would like to talk more about like businesses that are looking to get VC venture capital investment or VC investment, right, for them to grow. If you talk to 5, 10 businesses or even businesses founders on this call, they will say funding is one of their major challenges, right? But most of the founders of startups don't even understand the pressure that comes with money in terms of scale, because VCs want you to be able to scale, to be able to grow fast for potential returns on their investment. I'd just like you to talk about how founders can manage that, all right, in terms of, okay, you need funding. What are the kind of funding you should be looking for that will align with your personal goal and the type of company that you're looking to build, so you don't have unnecessary pressure or just think about scaling and growing all the time?
I think it's important to start by realizing what you can do without money. So, and I come to this, Kolapo, we met because I was trying to figure out how to raise an investment fund and figure out how that works. And in the end, I didn't do it. Everything I'm saying, it's with an appreciation that you need a certain level of privilege to be able to do a lot of this. A lot of us have families to feed. So we've got to keep roofs over our heads. It's really hard to try and build a new business while we're trying to do all of that. And I get that. The interesting thing is, though, you don't have to go straight to funding. If you can, there's so much you can do without that. So things that you can and should do before you even think about money is you should think about the idea you have. You should think about validating it with your customers. So, and you can do that through surveys, through talking to people. You can create prototypes of your ideas. So again, if you can get a little bit of data and start using programs like Figma, you can actually build wireframes, so mock-ups of the products you want to build, and you can test them with people. And you can change them and iterate, and you can figure out what you need to build, but also learn what the market wants. And so you can do a lot of things before that. And if you can do a lot of that, sometimes that's enough to get an investor interested, especially a very early stage investor. What they want, especially early stages, is they want to believe that you have the skills to do this. But more than that, they want to understand that you've done the work to understand the problems in the market and that you're going to build something people want. So that's just a lot of stuff we can do without really anyone else's money. A lot of us don't have the privilege to hire people or leave jobs without raising money. That's hard. But the more you can do early on to give people confidence that you're the right person to do this and that you've done the homework, the more chance you have of having a good conversation with an investor.
Great. Yeah, and I think that part of answers like the next questions I'm going to ask, which is at what point should a startup start thinking about scale? All right. Yeah.
Yeah. So scale is nothing to worry about whatsoever until you're really, 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 really sure that you've built something that people want. That means you've built something and people are either buying it and using it, or if it's free, then they're using it all the time. Now, that's a hard thing to judge sometimes. And what investors look for when they think about something which is ready, or what you should think about when it's ready to scale, you can normally tell. You can normally tell because suddenly all of building businesses is just incredibly hard. It's not something that sensible people do. Sensible people just go and get a nice job in a bank and earn lots of money and don't worry about building businesses. But if you're not sensible, that's probably why you're on this call, then you know it's going to be hard. But the thing is, when you get to the point where you need to start thinking about scale, things start feeling a little easier. It's people start referring, your customers or users start referring other people to try you, or you see people suddenly using your product more than they were when they first joined. There's normally a lot of signs that tell you you're doing something right. And again, at that point, investors get really interested, especially if you can articulate a big vision for what you're doing. So you don't need to worry about scale to start with. You do need to think about how you, once you've built something, and once you're sure of an idea and you've built something, to see if you're right. If it goes really well, what is the process for selling that thing or getting it into people's hands that you can repeat? That's what people are looking for, because if you can repeat the process, the acquisition process of getting new users or getting new customers, then you can scale. But you can't figure out that repeatable process until you've built something people want.
All right, great. And that also connects to the next question, Paul. And I think you mentioned some of these in terms of metrics. All right. You mentioned when you're sure people really want what you've built, then you can now start thinking about scaling it. All right. Are there metrics across different industries to look at in terms of maybe you're using freemium, you're building a mobile application, you have a certain number of users, revenue? Are there any metrics that you can guide you?
I think, Kolapo, that a lot of investors make up metrics that don't exist just to keep people on their feet. Things to think about, and there are a lot of different ways of measuring success in a startup, but basic things to think about: if your users are consumers, so they're not other businesses, then the things to think about are how many times basic things, how many times they use an app, how long the sessions are, whether their usage increases or decreases over time, and whether you can see that they refer other people to use it. If you're building something that is used by other businesses, so a B2B product, then some really good metrics to measure or look for. One is cost per acquisition. So basically, how much are you having to spend to find a new user? And it's entirely acceptable to spend a lot of money getting a new user if they're going to, a new customer rather, if they're going to spend a lot of money. So if you are, I don't know, if you were charging $10 and over time you understand the customer stays with you on average for 2 years, then you're going to make $240. It's very acceptable to spend $60 or $70 getting a new user. And that could be through marketing, direct sales. So you like to understand basically the cost of how much you have to spend to get a new user through marketing or reaching out to people. You want to understand how much money you can make from that person, so average lifetime value. And then another really basic metric that applies no matter whether you're selling to the public or to other businesses is churn. And churn is basically how many customers or users you lose every month. Because it may feel like losing 10% of users or customers once a month is acceptable, because that means you've still got 90%. But it does mean that in order to grow, you first have to replace that 10% and then find more on top of that. And if you don't replace that 10%, the next month you lose another 10%. To get back where you were 2 months ago, and then you've got to find more on top. So you've got to pay attention to churn. It's very hard to grow if you're losing more people than you can attract. So those are the basic ones I think that you need to look for if you're thinking about scaling.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Paul, for talking about that. CAC, customer acquisition, it's tricky for very early stage founders, all right? Because I think they're still experimenting across different channels, maybe like social media. They can't even afford to do billboards because they can't even measure the numbers of people or impressions viewing their ads. So using CAC or the customer, trying to know your customer acquisition, because it was a big of challenge for me. I remember when I was building my startup and raised, and there were questions like, what's your CAC? And at that point, I think we just raised maybe like 10,000 or 15,000. But we're still very early, right? So it was just hard for us to come up with a number, try to think, what is a CAC, all right? Because we are still experimenting with different channels. So at what point do you think you can get the right number for understanding what your customer acquisition cost is for maybe businesses or founders that have got to like product market fit, and they don't have that much budget to, to spend on market acquiring new users? How does that number come about?
So it's at the start, it's not something to worry about. Again, okay. You're not worrying about scaling or month-on-month growth at the start. The thing to worry about is just figuring out that you've built the right thing. So it's not something to worry about. It's those first few sales, and I'm talking because my experience is more B2B than it is consumers. But okay. The first few sales should be done by you. And that should be reaching out, that should be knocking on doors, that should be email. It should be just you doing it. You don't hire people, you do it. Sometimes it can cost a lot. Sometimes it's not just about cost in terms of money, it's cost in terms of time. And it takes a long time to figure out what works. Don't think as much about how much it costs, think about figuring out the best way to do it. And then once you 10 times, then try and do it 20 times, then try and do it 50 times, and then start worrying about how much this is costing you. Now, that's easier to say, but again, this isn't necessarily something. Finding people to sell it to, it's more about really understanding what you've built in the first place. If you've built something that solves a very specific problem for a very specific group of people, you shouldn't have difficulty finding that group or knowing where they are. A lot of the problems we find after we built something are normally because we haven't figured out all of this information before we started. We've just built something because we thought it was a good idea. And so once we built it, we don't know where to go with it. But if we know we're solving a problem for particular people to start with, we know where they are when we're ready to try.
Great. I think that answers a lot of, that answers that question. That's kind of precise, spot on. Because, some investors just want to give you some unnecessary pressure, and you're confused as a founder at that stage that, okay, how am I supposed to figure it out? So it's really critical to understand no rush. I mean, we're still building out and we don't have that numbers. And the next question would be to understand what are the key challenges faced when a startup is ready to scale. Let's say you figured out your CAC, your ALV, and all other daily active users. You have an idea of all those metrics, and you're now ready to move. So what are some of the key challenges you think startups face at that point?
I think the biggest challenge to scaling is people. It's hiring and keeping hold of the right people. It's really easy to hire bad people, and it's really easy if you're lucky enough to get to the point. If you're lucky enough to get to the point where you can hire a lot of people, there is a danger that you and the problem is if you start putting bad workers in positions, it sets the tone for the rest of the business. If you hire someone who doesn't work very hard, other people see that and think they don't have to work as hard. And again, it's a little bit like churn. The problem is if you lose too many people too quickly, then to grow, you not only have to replace them, you have to then hire on top of them. So I think for me, there's very few of us building business that we are basically using other people's tools to build. So we're software developers rather than engineers who are creating new and fantastic things. So there's very few of us that ever run into technical challenges in what we're trying to do. It's normally the problem is people and just finding good enough people. And I think some of the challenges, I don't know the Nigerian market very well. I know a little bit more about the Kenyan market. And I think one of the challenges is because there haven't been a lot of tech startups and scale-ups, is that on the ground, you don't have a lot of people who have sort of a decade or 2 decades of experience. If you step into Europe or the US, you get people who've been through several businesses and they've learned how this works repeatedly. And I think in 10 years' time, it'll be very different. Just imagine just the number of big companies coming out of Nigeria right now, the Paystacks and the Flutterwaves, and the amount of money going in. It's going to be really exciting in 10 years, but one of the biggest challenges right now is hiring enough people when so much money is coming in. So that, by the way, is a really good advert. Just go and be a developer. Go and be a developer and make all the money in the world and do your startup after that. Make all the money first and then do a startup. Yeah, so it's people. People, I think, is always the biggest problem.
All right. Yeah, so there are conversations about option pool equity for founders. For employees at the early stage to attract talent. All right. And I know I talked with quite a number of startups, and some of them are thinking about using some of those methods to attract talent to their startups because they can afford to get top talent. So what can you say in terms of using option pool, equity employee to attract talent? And is there like a range typically that startups tend to use maybe in Europe or in the US to attract top talent on their thing?
Tech startups, especially with the type of the size of investment raised, can come up with a lot of ways to attract talent. And that is big benefits packages, health insurance, schooling for children, option schemes. I think the challenge is that unless you take a bigger view, or unless government and society takes a bigger view, all you're doing probably is moving people from one tech company to another. What actually needs to happen is you need to go to the source of all those developers, and that's education. And you've got to if you nail that and you make sure that actually in general, you've got a high level of education at younger ages, and you expose them to the opportunities earlier, that means there's going to be, not only just a massive supply of people who can fill these roles when the money comes in, but it also means you're more likely to empower people to start their own businesses and have the tools to do it. There's a lot of things going on, especially post-pandemic, in how companies hire right now. I think the biggest challenge on this continent isn't ideas. There's so many opportunities and so many brilliant people. The challenge is finding people here to do all the jobs. If you are successful at getting any type of scale, it's a huge problem right now. It's one that's felt in other areas of the world. It's felt here a lot, I think. And that a lot of the time is because we've kind of been let down by the state and education to a point. Sorry, that was a political statement. It wasn't meant to be. But yes, option pools are good there.
Yeah. I think that's quite helpful. All right. So let's talk about company culture, right? I think you mentioned it earlier as well when you said if you don't hire someone that is hardworking, that can set the tone for other people coming in the company, right? So essentially, I would like you to talk more about that and maybe add other points on how company culture can also influence skill.
Okay, so company culture can make or break your ability to grow and scale as a company. There are a lot of founders who think that it's all the fluffy stuff. It's all the nice things, the nice to haves. We don't need values. We don't need principles. They're not important. People should just work hard. And the problem with that is that if you can't get behind a set of ideas, it's really hard to judge when people are working hard or working in the best interests of the business. And every business stands for different things, right? It's you go to businesses in the US and there are businesses that ban any discussion of politics. You go to other businesses and they will want you to work 60-hour weeks. And there are other businesses that will absolutely want to put your mental and physical health first. Values and principles and culture help us as employees decide where we want to work, but it also sets the tone for how the business works and who joins in. So when I talk about the biggest problem of scaling being people, if you've got the right culture, it's a lot easier to attract the right people. If you don't believe in those things, in culture, and the other thing, the interesting thing about culture is we can talk about it a lot, but actually our culture is what we do, it's not what we say. And I'm sure there's plenty of people here that have done that. They've been into a business or they've spent time in a new job and the culture isn't great. And often there'll be people saying, what a great place there is to work. And you're working there and you're thinking, that's a lie. That's not true. This is terrible. This is the worst job I've ever had. So culture isn't what we say, it's what we do. And it's the sum of basically the behavior of the business. And it's important. It's important to get that right. People have to feel supported. If you support people and give them opportunity and you challenge them, but in a fair way, then people will work hard for you. If you leave people in the business who don't work hard and you don't tackle that, actually you've got trouble for yourself. So it's really important, and it's really important for growing businesses. And even in my last startup, the first thing I did, literally day one when we got into our new office, when there was 2 of us sat across the desks, is I wrote the principles for the business. I wrote 6 statements about how I wanted us to work and how I wanted us to be with one another and how I wanted us to act with customers, because that matters and it sets the tone. And then people can choose to join you, in which case they're all in, or they can choose not to, in which case that's okay. It's not for everyone.
Great. I think that's very critical. for founders to know. It's not about like the fancy things. It's understand to, to have a clear sense of direction. And that points me back to your statement earlier that you have to know why you're building. What is the reason you're building, and I believe that also, kind of influence the culture that you will have in building. All right, so let's talk about process management. Can you tell us about that in the place of scaling?
Process management, that's the sexiest topic in the world, isn't it? So I'm starting a new startup, which is about operational process and how we manage processes in a business. They're not important when there's small numbers of you. And especially at the very beginning, you know each other, you're happy to work together. As businesses grow, all the internal processes start getting really messy. So a really good example of this is when you're only 5 or 6 people, if somebody wants to take some holiday or take some time off, you normally just mention it to them across a desk, or you might email them. That's fine. What happens is, as you grow, you get to a point where you start hiring a lot of people you don't know very well. So normally the first hires are people you know. And then as you start growing, you're hiring people you don't know. And so you need policies and process, because that's what proper businesses have. And you panic and you will go and cut and paste everything you've seen on the internet and put it into a document. And that's a policy. And the challenge is this creates a lot of admin. So as you grow as a business, every business has payroll. They will have maybe pensions, maybe not. They'll have benefits. They'll have laptops. Everyone will have an account. Everyone needs to be onboarded. And the more you grow, the more tasks there are to do and the more processes there are. And it just gets really messy. And you end up, if you have to do this job, and I've done this in 3 businesses now, is you end up using some software, some SaaS tools, but they don't all join together properly. And so there's gaps in between them. And so you use spreadsheets. And so even if you're a massive business and you're scaling really quickly and you're spending thousands and thousands of dollars on SaaS every month to manage all these processes, you will still use spreadsheets. And that causes all sorts of other problems, because then the data's in different places. If you have to do finance, you can't find it. You don't know who's got it. It's really boring stuff. It's the most boring topic in the world. But every business that has people has to have all of these processes. And so managing those processes so that they're efficient and they work properly, it's the most boring topic in the world, but it's really critical to scaling businesses. And the interesting thing is that whether a business has 100 people or whether it's on the stock market, the percentage of resource that you will use managing those processes is about the same. So there are no economies of scale. It doesn't get easier or faster or better as you get bigger. It's a really tough problem. It's a boring problem, but it's one that costs businesses a lot of money. And so that's process management. And that's what, I'm not this boring in real life, I promise, but that's the kind of problems I'm trying to figure out right now.
Yeah, I think that's really amazing. I was reading an article last night about a Pakistani startup, Airlift, that burned through I think over $85 million in 11 months. All right. And when I was reading the story, it was about, part of maybe like the insider gist about what led to the company not being able to raise follow-up funding and all that, is that the process was a mess. They were hiring so fast, they were setting up warehouses across the country very fast. People were stealing groceries, merchandise. They were complaining about issues. Nobody was responding. There was just a lot of flaws, in that process, and they burnt a lot of money so quick, and they had to share. So I think it's really very, very, important, everything you've said about process management, and how that is very, very important to start off as the scale. All right. Can you tell us about Ricochet AI acquisition story?
Yeah. So my last startup was called Ricochet. It was a SaaS tool. It was B2B, and what our big vision for it was to say to people, imagine what Google looks like in 10 years' time. Imagine that if you want to find a business that you want to sell to, that you will type in a description into the Google search bar, and a bit like there are tabs that say images and news and shopping, there'll be one that says businesses. And so you'll describe the businesses you want to talk to and where they are. You'll hit the businesses tab and it will find you that information. That's what we wanted to build. We wanted to try and start bringing together all the B2B business data into one source of truth, and then help sales teams use that and try and shorten the time it takes to find customers. And we raised some money for that. We raised about $1 million in total, which I spent on a yacht. No, I didn't. I wish I did spend it on a yacht. It would have been a better use of my time and money. But we raised about $1 million, and we built Ricochet 3 times because we didn't quite get it right the first 2 times. We got to revenue, so we got to about $10,000 a month in revenue with the first 2 versions. But I think something I learned from doing that is that we hadn't focused enough on solving a problem for a small enough group of people. We built something that was very technically sophisticated and clever, but we hadn't done enough work at the beginning to figure out exactly who had the biggest pain. And this is what I said earlier. A lot of the problems you have once you build something, you can avoid a lot of them if you do the homework at the start and really dig into exactly who has the problems and why. So we made Ricochet 3 times. We pivoted twice, and by the 3rd time, we built something which was really interesting, but we were running out of money. We hadn't figured out product market fit with the new version. We had 2,000 users, but they were free. And it was, for context, this was September 2020. So I wasn't sure what the world was going to look like, and no one was really sure. And so rather than try and raise money, I decided to try and sell the business. And it was at that time, it was more important to me that my team, I had about 8 people whose mortgages I was paying, who had families. It was more important I tried to find them jobs than we try and figure this out. So I probably stopped trying to build it early in the eyes of some. I think it was the right thing to do to try and look after people. And so what I did is I made a list of all the people, all the tech companies who might be interested in what we were building based on the technology, because we didn't have paying customers. And eventually we went through a lot of them. We spoke to a lot of big companies. We spoke to HubSpot and Crunchbase and LinkedIn. And in the end, we sold to a European company that did something similar to us, but we built the technology better. And I didn't sell for very much. I didn't buy a yacht. In fact, I could probably afford a nice sandwich with what I made from it. But my team got offered jobs, and that was really important. And I think, just very quickly to finish that, the thing I learned is that if you want to sell a company, if you want to actually make money when you sell it, the thing that another company will buy is your customers. They'll buy your order book. And if they can take that on, it gives them revenue straight away. That's the thing that matters. They then might buy the people. So an acqui-hire, they'll take the people on because if they've got the right skills. Again, in this current market, finding the right people, especially software developers, is really hard. And then they might buy the technology, but only if you're doing something really interesting. So it's in that order. If you want to make money, you have to have customers. Otherwise, selling a business, you're not going to do very well.
Great insights there, Paul. So yeah, as we round up, before we open up the floor for questions from the audience, can you tell us about your new project and what excites you about it?
So I've talked a little bit about it. It's called Team House, and we're basically trying. So the big vision again, I gave you the vision for Ricochet. The big vision for this is in every business that has employees has employee processes. So that's payroll and pensions and benefits, but every business has to create them from scratch every time. There's no playbook for doing it. There's no box with all these things inside you can start using. And so we think in the future, what will happen is that there will be something like an employee operating system. There'll basically be a platform that does all of these things from scratch, because they're 90% the same in every business. The detail and the data changes, but the process, payroll, no matter which company you're in, looks pretty much identical in terms of the process. So we think that in the future, this will just be standardized software. And that's what we're trying to build. We're trying to create those efficiencies inside businesses around people processes. And it excites me because I love problems. They might be boring, but genuinely, my background for the last 7 years, apart from the accelerators, I've worked in operations and as a chief of staff. And so my job has been having my head in these problems and trying to figure them out. And in my last job, I was working with the head of operations, and our job was basically trying to scale these processes inside a Series A business. So we'd raised about £11 million. And we were trying to figure out how to do this. And it's really hard. It's really hard to do it well. It's very easy to do it badly. In fact, it's very easy to do a lot of things in life very badly. And it's very hard to do anything in life very well. So we're trying to do it very well. And we're trying to do it for lots of people. And that's Team House. And that's why I'm excited about it.
Great. Sounds really exciting. I mean, an interesting operating system for companies, which kind of emphasize people, right? Because all this operating system will take care of the people. We understand the people, and which is what will ultimately, make the business grow. So thank you very much, Paul. It's been an exciting session here today, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm sure people, on the call too, they're having a good time, and they've learned really new things and very insightful from you. So it's now for questions from the audience. So let us know if you have any questions. At the time I saw somebody raising up, and so if you have any questions, so feel free to type it in the chat or just signify so I can call you to question.
Oh, I can ask a question while you're thinking of questions, which is, if you can use your emojis, put your hand up if you are a founder and you're building a business right now. Either people don't know how to use the emojis. There's an emoji.
Yeah, it's coming up.
Cool. So, Kolapo, I can mention that I do, my background, apart from being a founder, is, as you mentioned, working on accelerator programs. So I've worked for a long time with Techstars. I've started a couple of programs in Europe. Every week I do office hours. So people can book time with me and just chat through ideas. It's free of charge. There are no strings attached. I'm happy to do it. So I'm happy to share that link if people have any specific problems they're trying to figure out. I'm more than happy to have a chat.
Great. Thank you for that. Please feel free to put that on the chat. I will also share with the sign-ups after the. So I can see some hands up and down again. Is anybody, you have questions? Okay, we have from Tonya. So Tony, I will ask you to unmute now. So just introduce yourself, your business, your role, and go into the question.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Tony.
And it would be great if you can turn on your video so that we'll see you.
Oh, okay. Let me turn it on. Oh, okay, good afternoon.
Yeah, good
Hi.
afternoon.
Okay, my name is Sonia. I'm a textile designer. I make handmade fabrics, Adire fabrics. So I want to know how to make my business to grow. I want to know how to push it, how to make it to grow better.
That's a great question, Tonya. I'm probably going to give you an answer that isn't helpful, but I'll try. What's a good way to make it grow? Early businesses normally grow through referrals.
Okay.
So if you're building something that customers love, then the first place to maybe start is try and help your customers sell for you. So what kind of things do you make, Tonya? Do you make clothing, or do you just sell the fabric?
No, I design handmade fabrics. I make handmade fabrics. We call it science by Adire. I make handmade fabrics.
Okay. I don't know how that industry works, so it's hard to give you exact advice, but a good place to start is think about how other industries grow as well. So is there something you can do with referrals? If one of your customers sends 3 new customers to you, can you give everyone something for free or at a reduced price? Can you incentivize people to buy more? Can you use offers, or if people buy more than once from you, can you do something for them? I'd try basic stuff to start with, but without understanding much about textiles is not an area I know a lot about. So I would start by doing really basic stuff and try and get community referrals.
Okay. So I want to also ask, how can I get support? How can I get support in my business? And which network do I need to advance my business as a female entrepreneur?
Oof, that's a good question as well. I would imagine Kolapo could answer that better than me.
Yeah, sure. So since you signed up for this event, we share opportunities on the platform day in, day out. So you definitely just make sure your email will be added to our newsletter so you get more updates. I think there are quite a number of opportunities flying around right now that you can take advantage of. Are you located in Lagos? Where are you based?
Yes, I'm located in Lagos.
Okay, great, perfect. You get more from us.
So should I send my email or something? Should I send my email because
Since
I
you
don't know.
did you register for this event? You registered?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, so
Yes,
no worries. We'll add it to our newsletter.
Okay, no problem. No
All right.
problem. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Sonia. And let's move to, we have Adebisi Simon. I will ask you to unmute now. So please let us know your name. I'm sorry, you can introduce yourself, what you do. And
yes, good afternoon.
good afternoon.
I am Akani Adebisi Simeon, a chartered accountant from Ado Ekiti.
All right.
So,
welcome.
I'm into automobile business. And my wife is about to start designing business too. We just finished learning and we are just about to start. I've been listening to our speaker since, and I appreciate him for that brilliant presentation. But my fear is the question I want to ask is, what legal framework is there to guide this business online? A lot has been going on online, and you know us in Nigeria here, you know our peculiar problem and what we face with people. Is there any legal framework that guide this business? That's my question.
Oof. So I can't, again, I'm not the best person to ask about Nigeria. I think one of the challenges online is it's very unregulated in a lot of places. It's very hard to build for the right audiences sometimes. It's easy to build a website. It's hard to build one that can reach your audience. But in terms of legal frameworks beyond incorporating a business, I don't know if there's any regulation in Nigeria, but again, I think there's somebody on the call who can. But I don't know what restrictions or what is allowed in Nigeria. I'm not very good with the Nigerian questions. Kolapo, you'll have to save me on that one as well.
All right, yeah, I think, so we have a partnership with a law firm. It's called Punica. So they offer free legal, advisory session for startups within our network. So since you signed up to this Fireside Chat, this event, we will let you know when we are having the next series of advisory sessions start up, and I believe that will be very beneficial. So yeah, just watch this space, watch out emails from us, and when we're having series of events from our legal partners, I believe that will be very.
Kolapo, unfortunately, I need to leave the call now. So if anybody would like to talk, I'm better at answering questions about probably tech startups and B2B, but my link is in the chat. If that's useful, please get in touch or connect me on LinkedIn. I hope some of this has been useful. I appreciate you're not all necessarily building tech, but I'm happy to help if I can.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much, Paul. It's amazing to have you on the call. Thank you very much. And I'm unmuting everyone. If you can just say thank you for Paul leaving. Let us just appreciate him. You can just clap your hands, unmute, and say thank you.
Thank you. God bless you. More wisdom.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, everyone.
Paul. Thank you.
Please
Thank
share.
you, Paul.
Welcome, Betty.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And
Thank
please,
you. Thank you.
please get in touch if I can help.
All right. Bye-bye. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
But how do we get in touch?
All right. Yeah. So he shared his link on the chat. So I think you should check that out. There is a calendar link. You can connect with him on LinkedIn as well. His name is Paul Smith. I'm sure you've seen his face. So you can use that to just know the right Paul Smith to connect with on LinkedIn, or you connect with him on Calendly and find for sessions. And I'm sure you'll be happy to spend some time with you. So thank you, everyone, for being part of today's session. I think it's very exciting, and you've learned one or two things to help with your business. We're having another fireside chat next month. So plan to be part of it. We'll also share details via our newsletter, and we're looking forward to see everyone. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of it. Bye-bye.